The story begins with a man riding a train to the city when suddenly we see a group of hungry fairies in the distance. They spot the man and immediately approach to eat him. He tries to go faster, but the fairies manage to chase him. The terrified man starts asking for help, and luckily some passing soldiers decide to assist him. They are very strong and quickly eliminate all the fairies. Then we see them arriving in the city very happily because they can get some money from the fairies they killed. Then we see the main character, a man who unfortunately has not had a good life so far because the ability given to him hasn't helped him at all. And that ability is greed. The only thing this ability does is make him very hungry all the time. He is very hungry, and the job he has now as a palace guard pays very little, which is not enough for him. He listens to the conversation of the soldiers who killed the fairies and feels that he will never be able to become like them, so he considers himself worthless. At that moment his stomach rumbles again. He is very angry and blames his weak ability, but he is thankful at least for having a job. Then we see the city square where people are having fun. Someone says that the holy knights are coming, and instantly everyone is scared and the place becomes silent. As they pass, someone secretly tells us that they are three brothers, Blerick, Adu, Raphael, and Memel. At that moment, someone drops an orange which hits one of them. The man apologizes for the incident and walks towards the orange, but Adu rudely pushes him away and hits him for approaching. Meryl tells the man that he shouldn't insult a holy knight because if he does, he will be beheaded. But this is foolish. It's just an orange that fell. It doesn't need to be like this, but it seems the knights abuse their positions. Raphael comes to stop this, saying it's enough, so they leave the place. On the other hand, we see the main character still on duty. He is still very hungry but says his shift is almost over. Unfortunately, that's when the holy knights arrive. Raphael asks if he has finished his duty for the day, and Fado says yes. They then pay Fado, but in a rude way. Raphael throws his coins on the floor and tells him to pick them up. When Fado does so, Adu presses his hand. At that moment, Fado's stomach rumbles again, and Raphael is worried that people will think they haven't paid him, so Adu hits him again, asking if he intends to embarrass them. Luckily, Roxy comes to stop this. She is also part of the Holy Knights, but unlike them, she is more friendly and gentle with the people in the city. Roxy tells them to stop, that what they're doing is not the behavior of a Holy Knight, so they somewhat reluctantly justify their actions, saying they're just informing Fado about the city's norms. Roxy helped Fado to get up and clean his wounds, for which he later thanked her for helping him. Roxy replied that it was nothing and she was just doing her duty because Holy Knights should act like this. Now it's Roxy's turn to guard the entrance to the palace. When they are about to part, Roxy tells him that if anything happens again, he shouldn't hesitate to let her know. Fado tells her not to worry because he's used to such treatment, which touches Roxy. At dusk, we see Fado eating in a restaurant as he remembers Roxy's words, making him think hard. He says that if a situation like before arises again, he won't tell Roxy. Even though he asks him to tell her because he's afraid the Blerick siblings might do something to him, he doesn't want to involve her in his problems. Then the waiter realizes he's been beaten again and tells him that if it continues, he'll end up dead like the previous workers. Fado just listens while eating. After finishing, he pays the waiter and leaves the place, saying thank you. The receptionist is worried that he will end up badly if he continues to work with the Knights, so he worries about his situation. Then we see Fado walking in the city streets regretting that he was born with abilities that are useless to him because they only bring trouble. He says he at least wanted to be a warrior merchant or maybe a craftsman, but he feels he can't change things. Then he sees from afar a group of thieves entering the palace, so he immediately goes to tell Roxy to catch them quickly. When he arrives, Roxy is surprised that Fado noticed it. Roxy asks him to guard the entrance if anything happens while she defeats them, so Fado stays to guard the door. He listens from a distance as Roxy fights the thieves, but suddenly he can't hear anything. Then he sees a thief escaping and moving towards him, making him scared and wanting to flee. He thinks that if he does, it could cause trouble for Roxy, so he gathers his courage and throws the spear he carries, his weapon for fighting. He sees that the thief is injured but is determined to escape. Fado holds the spear firmly and stabs the thief in the chest, killing him. Then something happens to Fado. A voice inside him tells him that his ability, Gula, has been activated and now he has a new ability, telepathy, which means he can now read minds. He feels confused and doesn't understand what's happening. When Roxy comes to ask if he's okay, his ability to read minds is active and he hears everything Roxy thinks. Now, inside him, Roxy says that Fado doesn't look good and she doesn't like this situation. This confuses Fado even more, but in the end, he just tells her that everything is fine and he's okay. Roxy will report the incident to her superiors, but Fado begs her not to involve him in what happened and let Roxy receive all the credit. Attributes and abilities that satisfy its insatiable greed. Avaricia told her not to tell anyone about how her sugar's abilities work because it is one of the abilities that challenges divine law, which made Fado surprised to hear it and she believed that now she had to fight alone. But Avaricia told her that no, because she is here and she will never be alone again, which made Fado very happy. She immediately started cutting off the ears of the fairies to sell, and this would give her a little money. Fado said that this was enough to eat meat today, but Barisa told her not to spend it all because she also needed care. As they walked around the city, they met a man who kidnapped a little girl. Fado decided to follow him to save her. We see how the man ties her to a pole while saying mean things to the little girl. Alicia asked what she was going to do now, so Fado decided to save her by any means necessary. But before that, we see elsewhere, in an orphanage, a nun telling a story to the children there. She told them that the creator of this world was the goddess Laplace, and when she left them to go to heaven, she left them with special powers as a gift, and now she asks the children to thank Laplace for the food they will eat. All the children said thank you and immediately started eating snacks. But one of them was a little sad. The nun approached him and asked what happened. The child said that Laplace was not fair because the holy knights, the warriors, have amazing powers, but he feels sad because he has weak powers and he thinks that's why his parents left him. The nun told him that when Laplace protected the world, no one had power and there were no monsters, so everyone was the same. The child said that he wanted to be born in that era. Then, another nun came and informed that a little girl hadn't shown up and the girl was the one Fado would save. Her name is Sarah and she's very scared of everything that's happening to her. The man kept shouting at her and treating her like trash but then went somewhere else. Fado took this opportunity to help her. She approached her and told her that everything would be okay, then freed her. As they were about to escape, the man appeared again, mocking Fado's noble act. Fado took out her weapon to fight and the man kept underestimating her. At that moment, Avaricia spoke to her, telling Fado that she had an idea, suggesting that she go to the back and hide behind the boxes because the man considered her very weak and felt confident. Therefore, Fado quickly went with Sarah to hide. The man approached them, and then Barisa ordered Fado to kick those boxes to crush him, but he almost succeeded. The man became angrier and prepared to attack. Fado took his sword and attacked him directly, successfully cutting his weapon and injuring him. With this, the man fell to the ground, and now Fado wondered who ordered the kidnapping of the girl. The man said that his boss, Eric, gave the order, which surprised and made Fado think. Then, he left the place with Sarah, who had calmed down. As he was still hungry, Fado took her to eat meat satay. She said she had never eaten meat before, which made her feel sad and start crying. Then Fado took her to an orphanage, where the nuns thanked him for saving Sarah. He was surprised to hear this because it was the first time someone thanked him for his not-so-good strength, and he had never been able to help anyone. Sarah said she also had weak powers like him, telling a little about Fado's skill of making her very hungry when he approached her and telling her that even though the situation looked bad, there was always happiness in overcoming it. Sarah listened and became happy. Fado remembered the same words his father had said, which made him very happy because it helped him reach his current position. After that, they parted ways and headed home. Avaricia congratulated him for developing a new skill, the one-handed sword technique. Fado asked if it was good and said that with it he would learn secret techniques so now he could attack twice with one sword strike. This would greatly help Fado. Then, Avaricia said that the battles he went through were only because of luck that he won because it's not always the strong who win. Fado wanted to become very strong to defeat his enemies without relying on luck. He also said that tomorrow he would start working for the Hard family and that now he hadn't bought clothes for the event. This panicked him because it was too late to look for clothes, but he already got one. On the other hand, we see the restaurant where Fado usually eats. Someone tells the receptionist or bartender that the Sky Dragon has killed Sermon and Galia and wonders if it's time for the Hard family. The person says that Roxy will be his replacement, which means she will take care of it now, but he remembers that Sermon had control over the Sacred Knights, so he doubts if Roxy can control them. The next day, we see Fado who has become better and he heads to work at the Hard family's house. When he arrives, he is surprised at how big the house is and is amazed. Roxy comes to greet him and says she has been waiting for him. Fado is also surprised to see her and says she looks beautiful, which makes Roxy blush and thank him for the compliment. Then she takes him to his father's grave, who turns out to be Sermon they talked about earlier. She said that his father died 5 days ago in Galia by the Sky Dragon. Galia is a continent ruled by many monsters, and one of the tasks of the Sacred Knight is to stop them. Roxy explained that this year her task was to confront the Hard family, so her father had to leave. Her task is very dangerous, although rarely resulting in death, but there's a Sky Dragon that has been hidden for 1,000 years appearing, and her father's group nearby is attacked. Fado is touched hearing this. Roxy tells her not to look sad because now she is the leader of the Hard family and will ensure that brings much happiness. Fado promises to help her with whatever she needs. They almost shake hands, but Fado remembers that if she touches her or anyone, she would be able to hear their thoughts as happened previously in the battle against thieves, where she gained telepathic abilities, so she chooses not to touch her. Fortunately, they are interrupted by a household servant named Haru, who tells Fado to act like a hard family servant, which makes her respond with a somewhat nervous yes. So she immediately starts working. After a week, Fado has gotten used to her new job. Some of her coworkers tell her not to rush and do everything calmly. They also say that they already like her because initially when she came, they thought she was crazy when they saw her sometimes talking to her sword or eating so much meat. Fado apologizes for not having tried during these 5 years. Fado has been wandering, searching for meat. Then Haru comes to tell her that Roxy is looking for her. In the middle of the journey, Fado's stomach rumbles. She has just eaten, so she feels uncomfortable. When she arrives in front of Roxy, she invites her to have tea. Fado is very worried and doesn't care at all. She thinks that lately she's been feeling hungrier than usual and feels she won't last much longer. Roxy calls her by shortening her name to Faye. Fado is surprised by that call because only her father calls her that way. Fado says that her father also died because of a monster attack, but it was a long time ago. Then she asks why Roxy calls her Faye. Roxy reminds her that she promised to bring happiness to this house. That's why she calls her so affectionately, because now they are family. Fado is surprised to hear this and looks uncomfortable. Suddenly she faints. Then that night, she wakes up and finds herself taken to rest in her room. She finds a note from Roxy saying that she will take a day off tomorrow. Fado asks Avarisha why she fainted like that because she had never reached that point. Avarisha explains that her ability, gluttony, makes her unable to retreat after tasting a soul, meaning she needs to kill to satisfy her great appetite. But it's also beneficial for her because every time she ends a life, she becomes stronger. Fado's fate is to seek souls to consume until her death. Fado asks what would happen if she didn't do it, that is, didn't kill anyone. Avarisha answers that she would die of hunger or lose control and attack anyone around her. Fado is scared to hear this and afraid of becoming a monster. Greed asked her to take note of what she was going to say. She said to pay attention to her eyes. If they changed color, it meant she was very hungry. When Fado checked herself in the mirror, she noticed her eyes were red, which made her very scared, so she decided to go hunting for some monsters to satisfy her hunger. She killed some elves, but it wasn't enough. Then Greed told her to go to the forest because there were bigger monsters there. After arriving, she killed several strange creatures, which finally satisfied her hunger. Moreover, thanks to this, she gained new attributes and healing abilities, meaning she could continue fighting without much trouble when injured. Fado didn't want to return to that point of hunger and faint again, so she had to go kill monsters occasionally. Then Greed said she was ready to reach her first level so she could transform. Fado asked how. It turned out her sword could also level up, and when it did, its shape changed into another type of weapon. But for this, Greed needed Fado's attributes. Fado was reluctant to give them because she would lose everything. Greed said they were a team, and she also deserved to level up, so she gave all her attributes to Fado, and we saw her transform into a very elegant bow. This was a magical bow that by just moving the arrow, a list appeared to be shot. Fado tried it and was impressed with its greatness. Then she cut off the ears of the elves and left them at the orphanage to be sold and provide money to feed the children. The next day, we see a suspicious girl about to leave the Hart family's house, but Fado stops her and asks who she is. She's frightened, but when she turns around, she realizes it's Roxy, but dressed differently. Fado asks if she's going there. When Castillo dresses like that, she approaches her and tells her what she planned. She says she's going to the city for a secret inspection, but please don't tell anyone because if Haru finds out what's happening, he'll have big problems. Haru always wants all members of the Hart family to dress properly according to the responsibilities they have. Fado tells her not to worry, so she'll continue her work. But suddenly she's stopped by Roxy. Roxy says she has an idea. She asks if Fado wants to be her guard during the inspection, and Fado finally accepts. They head to the city, and Roxy tells her to be careful not to call her by her real name because people will notice, so she asks to be called Rocky. Fado hears this and thinks there's not much difference. Fado tells her to be quiet because only Prat can hear the sword as he has telepathic abilities, which allows him to listen to people's thoughts by touching them when alive. However, Roxy misunderstands, thinking Fado told her to be quiet. Prat says it's not for her, and Roxy feels relieved. She says she's very excited about this mission, which makes Prat happy to accompany her. This becomes an awkward moment as they both turn red and confused. Right at that moment, Greed speaks to Fado again, saying they look very sweet. This makes Prat angry, and she takes her sword, asking Greed to be quiet. Roxy asked Fado not to take her sword roughly, then she asked Fado to look at it because she had never seen it up close. While doing so, she realized that the sword needed maintenance, so later she would introduce it to the Hart family blacksmith to help her. Avarisha was very happy to hear this. After that, they continued Roxy's mission. As they walked around the city, they saw many merchants offering their products calmly and friendly. Roxy saw some good wine, and the seller told her that it was wine from the Hart family vineyard, and let her try some to see if she wanted to buy it. They both liked the wine. Roxy almost made a mistake by saying that it was wine from her house, but Fado pretended that a member of her family worked for Hart, so the seller didn't suspect anything. While they were buying wine, someone informed them that a holy knight was approaching them. Everyone made way for him. People wondered what he was doing here because it wasn't where he usually walked. When Fado heard his stomach growl, this holy knight surely heard it as he approached. Fado apologized, but the knight wanted to hit him, but Roxy stopped him, saying that Fado had already apologized. However, this made the knight angry, and he asked who Fado dared to respond like that to a holy knight. He started to recognize Roxy but couldn't remember where he had seen her. Others started to speak, thinking he was Roxy. Fado thought hard to divert attention, so he pretended they were a couple, making Roxy feel awkward because she had never taken a man's arm before, making her heart pound. Finally, they could leave without being suspected, and after that, they sneaked into an alley. Roxy held Fado's arm all the time, and this activated Fado's ability. He began to hear Roxy's thoughts, saying that she had never held a man's arm before, making her very nervous. Fado moved away from Roxy so the moment wouldn't be too awkward and apologized for being too close. Roxy said it was okay because she was used to it. Yes, of course, but okay. Then they started to see an interesting gemstone shop that caught Roxy's attention. She saw several of the same stones and asked the owner if they were also gemstones. The man said maybe one of them was a gemstone, or maybe it was just a game to see if they were lucky. At that moment, Greed spoke to Fado. Greed approached Fado and claimed that with his ability in appraisal, he could tell which stones contained gems. This would be considered cheating, so he had to be very careful because the merchants hated those who used appraisal abilities. Roxy was very interested in getting gems, but in the end, she didn't buy anything, even though Fado seemed to want to buy her something, but he changed the topic of the conversation. Then they continued their mission while strolling around the city. Some passersby nearby were talking about some fairies found dead. There were rumors that they believed the one who killed them was a wandering monster. They also talked about an orphanage that received donations of fairy ears. Fado was surprised to hear this because he was the one who did it all, and the townspeople were beginning to find out. Roxy approached them to find out more, but they didn't know much about it, so they told her to ask a soldier. She immediately asked Fado to take her to where the soldier was. Fado asked if it was about the city inspection. Roxy said yes because she wanted to know who the wandering monster in the capital was. Fado was scared to hear this, but they didn't tell Roxy that he was the one, and he took her to where the soldier was, a restaurant where he usually ate. Upon entering, Fado decided to sit in his usual spot, but the bar owner told him not to because the place had been abandoned. He immediately recognized Fado, thinking he was dead, so seeing him again made him very happy. Fado introduced his partner, Roxy, or rather Rocky, to conceal his identity while they waited for the soldier. They ordered something to eat, and then a man who also knew Fado entered and was surprised to see him because he thought he saw a ghost. He also thought Fado was dead, but he told a little about the monster they were all talking about. He said he had investigated it and believed that the monster might be a lick, meaning he wasn't a living person. He also said that the Holy Knights would take action to find that person, which made Fado even more afraid because he thought now he would face the Holy Knights if they met. Fado worried that Roxy might be part of that quest because he didn't know what he would do if she knew he was the wandering monster. Then some soldiers came in to eat, and one of them approached Roxy to ask her to sit with them and have fun. This would be an insult to Roxy, so she pushed him against the wall just by touching him. It seems Roxy is very strong, everyone is impressed with what happened, and they say that only a holy knight could do such a thing. Well, Roxy no longer needs to hide her identity, so she lets her hair down and everyone is surprised again. She apologizes for deceiving them. Roxy is very famous for being kind, being part of the Holy Knights, and also being part of the Hard family, which is one of the 5 families that support the king. The man who insulted Roxy wants to apologize by giving all the money he owns. Roxy refuses and regrets that the people who swore to be protected by her are afraid of her. This makes her very ashamed because she is not like the other Holy Knights. She says that her dream is the same as her father's, which is to create a world where everyone can laugh together. After that, they had an enjoyable time, everyone chatting and playing with her. Then Roxy takes Fado to the blacksmith she knows to help him with his sword. Greed must be very happy about this. Rolante says they left him damaged. He thanks her for helping him. She says no, that she's the one who's grateful because thanks to her, she knows more about wandering monsters. He asks how could she not know that the knights would search for wandering monsters. She answers that the Blerick brothers didn't seem to inform her. At that moment, they hear a child crying. When they go to see, they meet the Blerick brothers hurting a little child. Roxy tells him to stop and let go of the child. He answers that he's just looking after a lost child but eventually releases him. Fado will go chase the child to help him, and now they will take care of the little child. At that moment, Roxy asks Raphael why he wasn't told about the wandering monsters. He He defends himself by saying that he thought she would be busy thinking about her deceased father, so they apologize and leave the place. The child will taunt them by saying he feels disgusted with the holy nights, and now they will look for the mother of the little child while walking. Fado remembers that he also got lost. It happened when his father died and he was left alone in the capital. He wonders what happened to the holy knights who took care of him then. After walking for quite a while and it has become night, they don't find the mother of the little child. Roxy says they will continue the search tomorrow and that the child can stay at her house tonight. This makes the child sad and starts crying, but luckily they find his very worried mother. Fado told Roxy to go home because it was late and they might encounter trouble. Roxy was scared and asked if they would be together if they got into trouble. The main character answered yes, and immediately they went home, ending up in trouble as expected. Haru scolded them, but nothing serious happened. Then Fado and Avaricia talked. The main character wanted to continue killing monsters but without anyone knowing, so he had to hide his identity in a certain way. The next day, he went shopping and found a strange mask. Upon evaluating it with his abilities, he learned that wearing it would make people see him differently, which would be very useful, so he bought it. Then he saw the gemstone they had seen with Roxy and wanted to give it to her. But to make it more interesting, he would randomly pick one stone to give. Of course, Fado had already analyzed it with his abilities and knew it contained a gemstone. So when they arrived home, he gave her the stone as a thank you for getting a new job, warm food, and the friendship he considered his family. When Roxy opened the stone, she was surprised to find it did contain a gemstone, making her very happy. Fado, of course, already knew because of his abilities and pretended it was luck. Roxy wanted to give something in return, and she asked him to choose whether he wanted to eat meat for a year or a stone to sharpen his sword for Barris. Hearing this, he became eager for Fado to accept the stone. The main character said it wasn't necessary. On the other side, we see a meeting of the Holy Knights led by Raphael to discuss the Agalia expedition. At sunset, a group of soldiers finds many fairy corpses. They are angry that the Holy Knights haven't done anything to find the people attacking monsters at night. At that moment, they encounter the main character, who makes them run, saying he is the lick they are talking about. Fado wants to increase his attributes before the knights chase him, so he goes hunting more often. The next day we see him working as usual, but he says he will take a double. Life isn't easy. He refers to the nights he goes out to kill and the days he works like a normal person, as Roxy says when she comes and invites him to her mother's house, which Fado accepts. On the way, we see him looking tired. It seems he stays up late killing monsters. When they're almost there, Roxy asks him to see Haru's family land, which impresses him with its size and beauty. When they arrive, Roxy's mother is waiting for them. Her name is Aisha, and she's happy to meet Fado. She calls him aside to ask if he likes her daughter. This embarrasses Roxy, who asks why her mother said that. Her mother explains that she asked if Fado likes her for who she is, meaning the way Roxy works. It's all a misunderstanding. Fado answers that Roxy is important to him and that he would give his life to serve her. Roxy becomes nervous again after this. Not knowing what to do, she says she'll go rest in her room and leaves immediately. Roxy's mother tells Fado that Roxy always does this. Whenever she's embarrassed, she leaves the place. She also says she can't believe Roxy became a holy knight and worries she works too much. Fado explains that Roxy is an outstanding knight, highly respected by the villagers, and responsible as the Har family leader. On the other hand, we see Roxy in her room, looking at a photo of her father and her childhood toys. We see memories of her father teaching her how to wield a sword properly, and she says she wants to be like him, following his footsteps and realizing his dream to create a world where everyone can laugh together. Roxy is saddened by the loss of her father, but she's strong and keeps moving forward. Meanwhile, Fado has started working with other workers in the vineyard. He enjoys his work and interacts with others. Someone tells him they're surprised to see Roxy come to help, despite losing her father. No one believed she would come this year, so they're grateful she finally did. Fado asks if Roxy comes here every year, and the person answers partly yes because she not only comes to pick grapes but also to kill monsters. Fado is surprised to hear this. The person explains that it's harvest season, and monsters always come looking for food. These monsters are called Kobold and come from the northern valley, so Roxy will handle them. As Fado's stomach starts to growl, someone tells him it's normal after hard work, but his greed tells Fado that so far, his ability only consumes fairy souls, so his hunger now is because he needs a different kind of soul. This means fairies are no longer enough to satisfy his cravings. Fado will consider this further later when he stores today's harvest. When Roxy comes to tell him he can go home because she'll stay longer, Fado will meet a girl who looks like a warrior.